Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I gotta start off with, I am literally broken today. I read a lot of dumb stuff. I see a lot of stupidity. I scratch my head and go, how did you make it? How did you get to be so old being so dumb? I do that a lot. In fact, so much so that my kids have actually, gotten to ask that question a bunch of times here recently. But Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Bobert has completely broken me today. And I'm trying to figure out if it's possible to put the pieces back together. I'm trying to figure out if it's possible that I have any faith left in our political system, any faith left in the voters of any particular region. Completely broken because today, Lauren Bobert tweeted out, protecting and defending the Constitution doesn't mean trying to rewrite the parts you don't like. Let that sink in for a second. Protecting and defending the Constitution doesn't mean trying to rewrite the parts you don't like. Now, look, I'm not a constitutional scholar. Don't pretend to be one. Don't play one on radio or TV. I'm far from it. Barely got out of high school history class. Even I know that the Constitution of the United States has these little things. These little things, they're, what are they called? Amendments. That's right. There are like 27 of them that throughout history we've gone, hey, maybe we should amend that Constitution thing. Those amendments are literally changes to the Constitution that people didn't like. It's literally rewriting the original intent of the Constitution, which, to be honest, give her, at least some. No, there's no points here because I don't think she understands the nuance of the argument anyway. There are people, the conservative far right wing, the Federalist Society folks who want to argue the original intent, which I get. I get wanting to argue the original intent, but you cannot be a female in Congress who cast a vote and be an original intentist. You can't do it because you wouldn't be in Congress and you wouldn't have voted because you weren't allowed. If we go back to the original intent of the U.S. Constitution, women weren't allowed to vote or own property or do a whole bunch of things. Clearly neither were blacks either. It was only white landowning males who were allowed to vote. And I look at her and I go, you do. Now understand, Gun Fetish Barbie loves the second one of those A words that they wrote into the original Constitution after. It was an amendment. It was something added to the Constitution. And I know, most people only think about as far back as yesterday, and give her a break. She's trying to make a point here. But here's the really bizarre part. And again, it's more of that, I'm broken. She, in her very, very short period of time in Congress, in fact, so short, I'm sure she doesn't even know where all the bathrooms are yet. She has co-sponsored an amendment for term limits. So now, let's go back just for a second. I know this. I know just a second ago is a long time ago. Lauren Bobert tweeted, protecting and defending the Constitution doesn't mean trying to rewrite parts you don't like term limits. I'm a big supporter of term limits in the form of I have the right to vote and throw the bums out. And I'm hoping the good people of Colorado exercise their right to term limit this woman to 1 term. If there were a way to recall her, please do that today. She is dumbing down the collective intelligence of our Congress, which is really hard to do given the last couple of years. But I can't help but go, this is what's happened to our Congress. It's turned into a popularity contest, not of smart people, because this woman, her claim to fame is she yelled at Beto O'Rourke. She said something mean to Beto O'Rourke, and that got other crazy people's attention. Go, yeah, she's going to stand up and she's going to fight to the Beto. She doesn't know a damn thing. Dangerously dumb. I want people who are, smarter than me, a lot smarter than me. I want people who actually know their damn 27 amendments to the Constitution. You should at least, and I've had this conversation with my T-Twizzler friends over the years, who actually carry it around in their pocket and still don't know they're a 27, even though they promote adding a 28th. But you got this woman saying, well, we shouldn't be rewriting the parts we don't like. I'm just broken. Just broken. And, you top that on top of, I had a listener who reached out to me and reported to me that Minnesota has windmills. And I'm like, yeah. Pennsylvania's got windmills. And they still work. Alaska, this person reported to me, has windmills. Finland has windmills. Siberia has windmills. And I'm like, yeah, I know. How is it that Texas's windmills don't work? Siberia has windmills. And I had to remind them that, look, the reality is that they have smart people there. They have people who said, hey, it's going to be cold. We should probably put a heating element in to make sure that they don't freeze, or keep them moving so it doesn't freeze. Do something to make sure that, we do deal with this. I mean, it's vision, it's foresight, it's regulation, it's thoughtful governance, it's thinking down the road. Not hooray for me, the hell with everybody else. And look, the Texas situation, as I pointed out yesterday, much more complicated than just the windmills, which Fox News wanted you to believe was the reason that all of this happened. It's all the windmills. When the reality is it failed because they didn't. Oh Jesus! They didn't bother to insulate the natural gas pipes, because most of the energy that they get, oddly enough, is from gas. It's from the natural gas. So if you freeze up the transmission lines, you have no power. They also didn't have sufficient storage. They didn't have enough to warm up the pipes. They didn't have enough to get I mean, it's crazy, but you stop and you think about just how much neglect, how much idiocy. The fact that they didn't do what people for a couple of decades now have been saying you need to do. This didn't just happen. This is something it's happened before, and everyone's saying this is a once in a century. No, it's happened twice this century. We didn't learn the lesson the first time. In fact, it's easy to go back now and look at all the reports that were out there from the last time that said, hey, maybe you should do this, 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 and this. And oh, by the way, had we done it back then, all the this, and this would have saved people's lives today. Had we been proactive, because everyone was saying, hey, it's a once in a century storm. It's not coming back for another 99 years. We got nothing to worry about. Here we are a couple years later, boom. Oops, I guess that's once in every 7-year storm. So are we going to wait 7 more years to do anything about it until the next one? And then we go, oh, gee, next year it happens again? And the answer, sadly, is yes, because we don't have leadership in Texas, because guess what? They're bought and paid for by whom? The energy interests, the people who made huge amounts of money off of this. This is failed leadership. This is bought and paid for leadership by corporate America. And understand, none of these people are going to be held accountable. It's not going to happen. They don't fear prosecution because they've got all the politicians in their pockets. This is what's wrong with our political system. We got stupid people in Congress, and the ones that are there are bought and paid for. Because corporations are people, Rick, don't you know? Mitt Romney said so. Citizens United, our Supreme Court, said that money is speech and money is corporate America, people. And how crazy is that? And again, going back to Lauren Bobert, we don't want to change the Constitution. When did corporations become people? When was that? Are they subject to the Bill of Rights? Can a corporation carry a gun? Just nuts. And I got tons of comments on her, almost pornographic, video of her with the guns all behind her. And you got small kids. Let's talk about irresponsible. It's just nuts. It's crazy, and I'm trying to find. I should go to the mall. If the mall were open, I could find myself, because I'm just in this spot going. Is stupidity rampant? Answer: sadly, yes. Some good news today, though, and I'm very happy about this. The House Democrats have unfurled their final version of the rescue package. The $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that they're calling the American Rescue Plan of 2021. Republicans losing their ever-loving freaking minds, trying to figure out how they can block, stop, or destroy it. I've heard one person say that these are payoffs to those progressives, those $1,400 checks that are wildly popular. In fact, like 70% of the public, a lot of Republicans going, yeah, we need this. Got to put food on the table. All those people down in Texas going to get murdered with electric bills. They need it too. Going to be interesting to watch how Texas wants socialism once the bills come due for all the crisis that their inept behavior has caused, all the broken pipes, all the need for infrastructure improvements. It's going to be interesting to hear Ted Cruz after his Cancun trip telling us how we need to do things to help people. But evidently this $1.9 trillion rescue plan is a bail. It's a payoff to those progressive. It's a payoff. It's also a blue state bailout. I've heard this a bunch of times. Even though again, back to reality, there were numerous Republican governors, mayors, city council people, voters across the country going, no, we actually need it. If we're going to keep the lights on, if we're going to keep our police departments, our fire departments, our teachers, our public services going, even in southern states that have very little of them, the state and local governments are going to need some money. They need help. And in fact, Biden's plan includes $219 billion for states, territories, and tribal governments. They also are going to throw in $10 billion to help small business, which is a good thing. Now, Republicans are also apoplectic over the fact that Biden has included, and the Democrats have included, $400 a week in extra unemployment benefits through, I think, the end of August. I think the 29th of August is what they've put out. Of course, Republicans, again, are saying, well, this is just going to make the lazy not want to go to work. And again, being the disingenuous party that they are, they full well know, like all of us know, that if you refuse to go to work, you don't get to collect unemployment. If you quit your job, you don't get to collect unemployment. You literally do not have a choice to not work. And they know that. They also know that for the last 40 years, the Republican Party has been hell-bent on destroying what was a benefit for working people in the form of unemployment compensation. Here in Pennsylvania, my congressman, the guy who, some dealings on January 6th, Scott Perry, he was one of the key players in harming our unemployment system. In fact, back, I think it was 2011, 12, when they quote unquote reformed Pennsylvania's unemployment system and froze at the cap for a decade. So allowed it to be eaten away by inflation and did a whole bunch of things that excluded people, seasonal workers, and people who didn't have enough, qualifying hours in certain quarters. Made it really complicated and much more difficult to get over the hurdle to get the unemployment benefit. But hey, that's what they do. That's their goal. See, because if we're going to give it to unemployed people, we can't give it to the very wealthy and corporations. So again, that redistribution of wealth from people who actually need it to the people who are hoarding it and ultimately filling their campaign coffers. So there is that. So again, very disingenuous arguments. The $1,400 for individuals making less than $75,000 is wildly popular with both parties and people not affiliated with either party. It's not a blue state bailout, although you're going to hear that for the next couple of days ad nauseum, because that's their talking point. It's one of the things that they've thrown out, so get ready for it. So when you hear it, when you hear Louis Gohmert or Lauren Bobert or MTG or any of the other Republicans go, "This is nothing but a blue state bailout," you'll know that bull. Also, the increase in unemployment benefits, which I'll be honest with you, we should be replacing a much higher percentage of the lost income through unemployment compensation when someone loses a job through no fault of their own than we do now. Now it's somewhere around 40%, 45% here in Pennsylvania. That should be up into the 80% range. And I've been saying that for years. Because this way, from a worker's perspective, and I know we only look at the business perspective of having desperate workers who are willing to take anything just to be able to exist. But by having a solid benefit, one, it's going to make employers think twice before they can people. And two, it's going to give people options. It's going to give you the option to not take that first job that may pay much lower than you were making before or be much worse conditions. The more we raise the floor, the more we raise the conditions of our jobs. And I'll tell you, that to me is a direction that we, without question, have to be pursuing. So for me, this rescue plan, something we need, investments we need, a jolt to our economy that we need. And I'll tell you, it's absolutely refreshing to me to know that we're actually talking about giving people help, as opposed to what has been the experience of pretty much my entire life with our government bailing out corporate America and bailing out the very wealthy with this bizarre adage that it'll trickle down. It'll rain down on us like rivers of honey and gold. The problem is most of the time it is yellow, a little saltier than I like, but it is yellow. There is that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1910. That was the day streetcar workers in Philadelphia walked off the job just as garment workers were ending their victorious strike. The walkout soon turned into a general strike. The Amalgamated Association of Street and Electrical Railway Employees Local 477 had been trying to negotiate fewer hours, higher wages, and union recognition for almost a year. Philadelphia Rapid Transit broke off negotiations in mid-February, fired 173 union members, and imported scab replacements from New York City. The Amalgamated Association of Street and Electric Railway Employees called workers out. Strikers pulled apart buildings under construction and used the materials to block tracks and build strike shelters. Many trolley cars were badly damaged when the Philadelphia Rapid Transit attempted to resume service. Scab drivers fared as badly as the trains they attempted to run. The mayor called for citizens to serve police duty after strikers loaded dynamite onto tracks in Germantown. The union offered up its members to preserve order, but the mayor refused. Then the Philadelphia Rapid Transit brought in an additional 600 scabs and National Guardsmen to protect them. Area workers were infuriated at this latest move, as were small businesses and religious groups. On March 5th, the Central Federated Union called a general strike. More than 75,000 workers stayed off the job to protest anti-worker assaults. Though the general strike was called off at the end of March, transit workers stayed out until April 19th. They won wage increases, rehiring of strikers, and mediation for the initial 173 fired workers. They could not secure exclusive union recognition, but the strike solidified solidarity among area workers and demonstrated the capacity of labor to organize work actions across industrial lines.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, I gotta tell you, the more I think about the Lauren Bobert tweet, I'm literally broken. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised at just how bad the Republican Party is, judging from yesterday's Ted Cruz stories. Just crazy, and to have him, then come out and say, well, maybe I was wrong, maybe I was wrong. Just, amazing stuff. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, the Cancun Cruz event. Also, maybe some thoughts on our gun nut Barbie. I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come back and talk with us. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm good. So let's start with Ted Cruz. I thought it was a really good idea to abandon the people of Texas during a little freezing storm when nobody has power. Take the girls down to Cancun. Good dad stuff. What's wrong with that?
Corruption. That's what this is. And I think it spills over. When we always talked about the cancer that is Trump, we always needed to be remnants after we got the chemo and removed the tumor and all that stuff. And this is part of that process is you see Ted Cruz getting caught and not only having to apologize, but then fumbling the response because they're able to dig in on the follow-up because there's not a clown out in front trying to distract from all this corruption. And so they don't know how to deal with this. They can't operate without having that cloud in front of them with Trump distracting, everybody from everything. And I think they're not able to adjust because they want to scream, but they just look like a bunch of jerks right now. Even when he came back, he blamed his daughters. I had mentioned that he left his dog Snowflake at the house or with somebody or something, but he didn't take the dog with him. It was just I know the last time any of my friends' daughters say, I want to go to Cancun to the Ritz-Carlton. Like, what are you talking about? Obviously they wanted to get out of town, but not only that, it was during a pandemic and they fled to Mexico. And then he came right back because there was too much pressure piling on him because he was being called out by the entire nation. And I think as he should be, and there should be shame and humility. But with this, there needs to be consequences that are real and dire, and he needs to resign. His political career should be over. There should not be a second chance to this. You don't need a second chance. This is judging his character all the way, and what it shows is that he's trying to be the next Trump, and we have to stop it before it expands.
Yeah, but you're judging this through the eyes of a Democrat. Republicans don't care. Republicans are like, you know what? Hey, he did the right thing. He took care of himself. He got the kids out of town. Screw those people. Either they sink or they swim. Either they live or they die. That's their problem. Government's not here to help people. We're not nanny people. Scott, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
There's no, if that is the thought process for them, there's no role for them in our government because there's no purpose. You're there to serve the people. You're not there to serve yourself. You're not there to be able to take vacations. You think during a pandemic when you're getting hit by a storm where people are freezing to death in your state where there's icicles coming off of ceiling fans and you don't know exactly where you're going to stay at night, people are losing everything. And on top of it, it's the pandemic. So it's not like a small sliver of things. And it's not like he didn't think about this. Yeah, maybe he was like last minute, but why did he have the time? People don't have basic needs. Like we are in crisis as a country right now. And this is the kind of barbaric stuff that it's a jerk move for him to decide to do it. But again, it's corruption. That's what this is. This is corruption, and we should not accept it because even if you're a senator, right? If you're a United States senator for your state alone, you could be raising money. You could be handing out things and being a good example as a volunteer. You have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has raised over $2 million from New York from her donor base. And she's also going to Texas to help out and hand out stuff and do the stuff that Ted Cruz might have done, but she's not attacking Cruz in the process. She's just promoting this to try and help people. And that's what we're actually trying to do.
Right.
And I just want to remind people that, yeah, if Republicans are the party of go help yourselves, then we have no role in our government anymore. Most of them don't anyways.
No, and this is where I gave him a pass yesterday. I said, look, I give Ted Cruz a pass. He understands the motto of lead, follow, get out of the way. He got out of the way. He's worthless. There's no need for him to be there. He's not going to do anything but be a drain. I had no problem with him going. Because that's what I expect of him, and I think that's what the people who voted for him expected. So I'm not surprised by it, and I know you are, because you believe in good governance, as I do, but not from him.
I'm not surprised by it. What I always remind myself of, and I know that this sounds like surprise to people, is that I don't let them normalize it. And so when I'm outraged by it, I am. And I do expect better, and I'm not going to lower the bar, and I'll never lower the bar. And that, we already did that with the former guy for 4 years, and that was enough. And I think, again, we're in charge. We have a mandate, and one of those things that we need to make sure happens is people held accountable. This is all just spilling over from the corruption of everything else he's done. I guarantee you there's something that he's done that's shady enough to push a resignation, and people are digging into it now. They're digging into every single thing he's ever done right now. And so good luck to Ted Cruz on his next endeavor. He should just resign and save the people of Texas the trouble.
There you go.
But if you're a United States Senator, you can do so many things that can help so many people. You are a United States Senator for the state of Texas. Get it together, man. Like, you have to be helping people full time. Not only that, you could get your volunteer force together. You could get thousands of people together throughout the state. Ted Cruz people, like all volunteers, hand out water bottles, donate this, do this, like directing traffic, making sure that you actually put the pressure on people to get the power turned back on, not just for yourself, not to just escape with you and your family. Like, this is not some kind of you have a guy that was born in Canada who went to 2 Ivy League schools, who's trying to act like he's relatable while he's running off to Mexico for the Ritz-Carlton. I mean, that is a song that I wrote, and it's really ridiculous. And I just think it really does spell out what the GOP stands for right now.
I absolutely agree. Real quick, I want to get your thoughts on this Lauren Bobert tweet that broke me today, and I think you probably saw it.
Yeah.
Protecting and defending the Constitution doesn't mean trying to rewrite the parts you don't like. I got to tell you, I sat and I looked at that for a good 5 minutes, and I didn't know how to respond.
Right.
And my response was, "Holy, you know what? You're stupid." That's all I could come up with. I'm normally not short for words. That was the best I could come up with.
It's a Trump trap, we can say. It's something where there is no logic to it, and so it's meant to twist your mind. Now, they may think that this makes a lot of sense in this instance, but if that were the styling, then she wouldn't have the right to vote. And like, that's just the most simple thing that we can explain here. I believe it's the 19th Amendment, but like if we didn't update things, then we wouldn't have a modern society. Like, we don't want to have what was back in the late 1700s. Does she want it to be the right to bear arms? Does she want it to be just muskets, like what they were intending it to be? If we want to take it verbatim and we want to do that, I mean, it really is. It's an attempt to be like a former guy, and it just fails miserably. The attempts cannot be duplicated in regards to the former guy's efforts, and they're desperately Bobert, Green, Hawley, Cruz. They're all trying to edge each other out to be the next one, but what they don't know is there's not going to be a next one, and we're going to make damn sure of it.
So what do you say to the, because there are some who are saying that the fight right now is over, the soul of the Republican Party and the Boberts and the crazy people are winning. You got Steve Bannon, who came out about my state of Pennsylvania and said that, whoever the choice for Senate is going to have to be a good God-fearing full MAGA nut. And he's planning on doing everything possible to not only do that, but I guess there's also a scheme to try and get Donald Trump to be Speaker of the House.
They are reaching
what
further than you could ever go. I'll say this: in the next 3 months, Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, and Adam Kinzinger will take over the Republican Party, and they will be the stalwarts for it, and they will hit a reset. And I'll tell you why. Number one, Trump's going to have all these criminal investigations into him, and there will be charges pressed against him. In my opinion, I believe that he will be criminally charged in Georgia, if not New York City as well, via the Manhattan DA's office. If not civil charges as well at the state level in New York. So they're not really going to be able to distract from that. So they're going to need to harness in, I guess a lot of the people who had pushed against this, the Capitol attack and fought for our country and stood up for it. They're going to take over the party. And here's why. The more information we're getting, I would assume that people within Trump's circle were aware and pushing for and hoping for a physical violent attack on the Capitol. And they actually talked about it and worked for it and pushed for it. And I think as we see the 9 indictments that came down today against the Oath Keepers for conspiring to obstruct Congress, which faces a maximum of 20 years in prison on top of the other charges that they have, I think as more information comes out from those court cases and elsewhere, other people are going to be implicated in this, because I think they went further in this, and maybe they got Trump trapped, as in like he brought them into the circle. But there's a large conspiracy. The FBI and the DOJ is working on it. They're going to uncover it. But this is going to lead to the ultimate part of Kinzinger, Cheney, and Romney taking over the party. I don't have a doubt in that, because they're already angling at this point. That's the only reason why McConnell kept on coming out. I assumed that him and Cheney knew intelligence because of Cheney's dad and who she is, and also McConnell being such a senior leader in regards to the Republican Party. They're going to be knowledgeable of what actually happened in full intelligence briefings. And so they know how bad it is, and it's going to come out. People came in there to assassinate people, and they used other people as cover, Trump people. And so that's going to come out. They're already talking about the military formations going on. So long story short is people who support that will be known as the traitors that they are, and they'll lose standing in the party because they'll lose other donors. They're losing too many voters, and people will have to reset leadership, and they'll act like they're outraged with this fake outrage, and they'll replace people, and it'll be more of the same. But at least we'll have some kind of people with moral backbone of sorts, with Reps Kinzinger, Cheney, and Romney. But I can already see them. They're jockeying pretty easily to the front of the line here. It's just going to take a matter of time, and the more indictments that line up. I mean, we're at hundreds of indictments so far, hundreds of charges. We'll be at thousands of charges, and probably like 500 arrests eventually.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is you're seeing a lot of these people who are ratting each other out. I mean, I was reading a story earlier today. One of the Proud Boys is, he's working with the FBI because he's trying to save his skin. And a lot of these so-called patriots, it's quite interesting to see how, they talked a tough game. They were ready to go down with the ship, and they were ready to go on fighting. But when it means actually going down, going to be interesting to see how many rats are in the ship and how they scurry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot with someone pounding their fist and screaming a lot while we keep on working, and I think that it shows the immaturity and the amateur hour nonsense that they want to play Nazi dress up and cosplay so that they can act like they're in the military in some kind of video game. And it's just an embarrassment to our country. It's a forever stain on our flag and everything that America stands for. And these are some of the worst people who have ever existed, along with the Nazis, the KKK, other white supremacy groups throughout the country. It is really the rot of America. Luckily, one of the positive spins, I guess we can see it as, is that luckily it's been exposed and we see it, and we don't fear calling it out publicly and strongly, and just put a spotlight on it and make sure it shines so that we can expose these traitors for who they are. They're a bunch of criminals. We always knew that they'd commit criminal acts. We never expected, for them to be this organized. But again, this is what happens when you let them just run wild, when you let domestic terrorists run wild throughout the United States.
No, it's an excellent point. And, one of the things, the other stories I came across today, 6 Capitol police officers suspended, another 35 being investigated. I mean, the fact that it's this pervasive, I know I shouldn't be surprised, but a little bit was.
Yeah, there's some standby. So one of the tactics, I'm not defending all of them, but some of them, one of the tactics if they were alone is to act like camaraderie, to act like they're one in the crowd, to take a hat, act like you're part of it so you don't get murdered. And so like if it was one of those situations, which are few and far between, most of these situations, they have an example and there's a reason why. They're just investigating further. So cell phone, text, pre-planning, Facebook messages, things like that. It is troublesome to see that some people were showing others around. Obviously there were sympathizers within the Capitol Police, and they're going to have to flush them out. And luckily they're doing a full assessment and not taking any chances with people. I think that people who work on the Capitol should be fully assessed in regards to any other intelligence officer and treated as such, where they are fully tracked and everything, their movements and their contacts and everything that they have is tracked by the government. And we have just a full essential personnel, because most of the cops are dedicated to the Capitol anyways, as it is. And most of them will be willing to do that. And most of them are good people who are standing, obviously, in the way of a bunch of terrorists. But there is definitely a lot of seems like acquiescence and agreement in regards to letting things happen. Obviously, then you have heroes like Eugene Goodman and Officer Sicknick, and there's plenty of other officers who got beaten with flagpoles and everything else that happened. So it's just a terrifying, disgusting kind of display, and I hoped for less numbers, obviously, but again, I think abundance of caution is the only way to go, so that's why the numbers are so high. Yeah. But I would expect some arrests in regards to Capitol Police members if they let a barrier removed, or they moved a barrier for them, or they showed them around the Capitol. You'll probably see 2 or 3 charges actually come down. They may be misdemeanors or something, but I'm guessing there'll
be something. I got to take a quick break here. I want to stick around for a minute. I got something on the other side I want to get to on voting rights and Florida and Georgia going after and changing some voting rights. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1997. And if you had theater tickets that evening to see Beauty and the Beast in Seattle, the show did not go on as planned. Musicians at the Fifth Avenue Theater, members of Local 76-493, had been on strike for a week. At issue was their compensation for performance. The union believed their wages were far below the industry standard for similar markets. The theater managers refused to budge. The union went out on strike, canceling 8 performances of the much-anticipated Disney Broadway musical. But this was the last night the theater stayed dark. Management brought in replacement musicians. The curtains rose with the scab musicians playing inside, while the picketers marched outside. The Musicians Union had a long history in Seattle. Local 76 was first formed in 1898. 60 years later, they joined the Black Musicians Local 493, integrating the union for the very first time. 18 members of the Local 76 participated in the Fifth Avenue Theater strike. 4 additional Disney musicians refused to play. Community solidarity for the strikers was strong. Each night, hundreds would join the picket lines. as a brass band played outside the theater. Violinist Libby Poole Presley was impressed by this show of support, saying, "I was floored. Here were hundreds of people helping us out in a stunning show of labor and community solidarity. To us striking musicians, it felt like magic to have the power of that many people behind us." The magic of solidarity helped the musicians win a contract victory and end their strike. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So now we're seeing in places like Florida and Georgia, the political powers to be trying to undo what they believe is how they got cheated, how the Democrats cheated, making voting more accessible to people, through either mail-in ballots or early voting. Well, both in Florida and Georgia, they're attempting to roll that stuff way back. And this is going to be the fight. This is going to be the fight for the next 2 years, because if they can limit people's ability to vote, that's how they win. And that's the only way they can win. And here to share some thoughts on this, Scott, I appreciate you sticking around through the break. So what do you think of this? You see in Georgia and Florida, they're going to go and we're going to cut down the number of hours that you can vote during early voting. We're not going to send out as many mail-in ballots. In fact, Georgia wants it to go back to you have to have a reason. You just can't have no reason at all to ask for a mail-in ballot. It is what we know it is, right?
It's pathetic and desperate, and it reeks of the KKK kind of tactics from back in the day and also currently. So they join those ranks because all they're trying to do is stop people from voting that are from the other party. They're not trying to actually limit their own voters. They're doing the same thing with vaccinations, where they're targeting rich white communities that they, are supporters for the vaccinations instead of urban communities. And it's really just, again, it's another symptom of corruption. They don't want. If everyone were able to vote, they could not exist as a political party that's actually in opposition. The only reason they're still in power is because they gerrymandered everything and have cheated their way through elections for the last 3 decades. And so it's really sad to see this many people, they want to just disenfranchise them instead of just disqualifying their vote. Now they just want to rip their right to vote away. And it's just, I don't understand why, as a politician, you wouldn't fight for as many people to vote as possible that legally should vote within the United States. And so I think every taxpayer that, it should have a right to vote, and everybody, you can have different rules within states or whatnot. But when you're just targeting this in specific areas, it's really, again, it puts you on par with the KKK. And there's no joke about that. It's a serious comparison. And so Ron DeSantis and that cheater in Georgia, Mr. Kemp, both of them, it's the same thing with the corruption that Abbott in Texas. You're going to start to see these things just spin out of control. I don't think that they're going to be able to pass extensive measures. If they do, it will backlash and they'll end up losing everything in the state legislature.
Right, but here's the thing. The people who vote for these people are OKKK with it. It just is what it is.
Sure, they might be at the moment, but like everything else, it eventually spreads too far, and then it hits somebody in your family or somebody that you know, and that's when they kind of draw the line. Eventually you're going to be giving us all the kindling that we need to fire our next election. There's a reason why you've been losing for 4 years, going on 5 now. They can act like they're winners, but we've been beating them in every angle. And so the next spot, the next battlegrounds in campaign land is going to be on the state legislative level and also on those statewide races, because we can't have, obviously people are dying because of Ron DeSantis and also because of Kemp and because of Abbott and their failures just to be a leader. I mean, they're out there blaming other people, blaming bills that don't exist, making up stories and telling other big lies to try and cover this stuff up. But the voting stuff is just hideous because, again, your job is to make sure that people have the right to vote. You shouldn't be doing anything to stifle it and to act like it's ballot security or whatever. That's just another lie. That's part of the other big lie that they told. And so they're just trying to commit fraud to cheat the way to winning another election, just like they've been cheating for the last at least 3 decades, if not 4 or 5. I mean, it goes back a while now.
Yeah, it goes back to the what was his name, the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation?
Tom Fitton.
The guy who said that we don't want everyone to vote. Our power goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Yeah, the less people vote, the better it is.
Yeah, I mean, but this has been their MO for decades. I mean, that was back in 1980 that this guy said that, and this has been the way they've been able to win, limiting the number of people who can vote, limiting the access to the ballot box. Not surprising. I mean, you go back to 2000, that's how they won Florida. You go to 2004, the caging, that's how they won in 2004. So they see their only path to victory is by limiting the number of people, especially in someone like Georgia, where you've got, I think, Raphael Warnock up for re-election in 2022. If they can peel off a percentage of the vote there, they could regain that seat.
Again, they don't have the former guy to distract from this kind of nonsense anymore, and they don't have control over the United States government. They don't have control over the House or the Senate, so basically Congress. They have the Supreme Court on their side and a bunch of judges. I get that, but they don't have other powers that they use to be able to abuse. And so with that, we have investigatory powers because all they're doing right now, I'm almost certain that some of the things that they're talking about and conspiring about are felonies. And so a lot of the things that they're talking about to stifle votes is actual election fraud. And because the intent is to stop others from the other party from voting. It's not an equitable vote. It's not making sure that only people who live in my state vote because there's a caravan of people. No. The only reason they want to do it is because they can't win without it. And that's cheating and that's immoral and that sucks and they should resign. Again, we shouldn't stand for it, and let's make sure that we call them out on it.
Yeah, last line of questioning I got for you. Joe Manchin today came out and said he's going to oppose the confirmation of Neera Tanden. And I guess his reason is she's too confrontational, she's inflammatory. She's probably not going to be confirmed. Do you think this is going to have anything to do with where he's going to be over the next several weeks? Because we're going to need him on the continuing resolution to get the stimulus bill or the rescue plan pushed through. I guess the question I got is how big of a pain in the what is he going to be?
Is a reminder that we need to expand the Senate majority as well as the House, but especially in the Senate. He's probably the only Democrat that can win statewide in West Virginia. And I would say that it's almost impossible for any other because he's got legacy, he's got family name is really huge in West Virginia. And they look at him as just like Manchin. They don't look at him as Dem or Republican, even though he votes mostly Democratic. So I would say let's see how long this lasts. I'll just say that. Let's see how long this game lasts, whatever he's playing with. I mean, it's not, he can act like he's going to play tough, but when the entire country is pushing back against him on that, then, I think that he'll look at the will of the American people and at West Virginians who want to demand that they actually have a person running OMB instead of not having someone or making sure that he supports President Biden's policy or at least puts people in charge. But this also may be where he's trying to take a stand here because he's going to vote in a way where he rips away the filibuster to pass the stimulus package. So this might just be cover for now, and then there will be a different thing down the street. He's not a game player like that usually. Like, he's usually pretty straightforward from what I know about him. But I would say with this, it seems a little like a distraction, and I'm not very worried about it. Let's see where it is when interviews go on and when the actual vote would occur. Let's see what happens, because I just don't see people taking as hard of stands as they're seeming right now. I think that people are going to be looking for cover for this big stimulus bill in case it backfires in some way or it's a slow rollout. I don't know exactly what they're trying to do. Maybe it's just the spending. He's afraid that he's going to lose because of that, or he just doesn't like Nira, which is he probably thinks just that. And we all know that she's shared her opinion as a Democratic Party person for years now. But if that's all they can find and that's all they've got, then look at the people, Joe, that you voted for before for the former guy's administration, and every single one of those guys is 100 times more corrupt than Nira. Nira is a saint compared to them by far, not even questionable. A person of honor and integrity and honest, and is not a criminal and is not tied to Putin in any way whatsoever. And I think the bar is low there in regards to that. So looking at any of these nominees and questioning it, I get how they want to act like there's some kind of balance, but it's total nonsense, because compared to I'll take any single one of these nominees against every single one of the former guy's nominees and everybody he ever had work for him, and not one of them will be any single one of them. And it's just again resetting the balance. Yeah. And there's some kind of thing going on here, I'm guessing, behind the scenes. There's a lot that we don't know. I'm not too worried about it at the moment, but again, let's see where things head, because a lot of people I'll just say, I haven't seen as many people gathering together and making sure that they push back and resist against this kind of decision. I don't think he'll be prepared for it, and I think that he'll again bend to the will of the American people.
We'll see. If I were him, I would be using my leverage to get as much of the state of West Virginia as possible, considering that state needs an awful lot. For me, I'd be pushing for massive infrastructure investment. I'd be pushing for massive, bailouts, if you want to use the Republican terms, payoffs to progressives, to use the Republican term, blue state bailouts, all of that stuff, even though it's a red state. I'd be pushing for all of that money to come to my state to improve the conditions. And we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and he'll get that with the stimulus. He'll be able to say, I voted for this and it brought this much money here, and it funded X, Y, and Z. And so it's pretty simple. It's a pro-America bill. It's not a party bill.
Bringing home the bacon. That's simple for me. But Scott, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff, my friend.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Here's the thing. I go back to this, and it's really pretty simple. That rescue package has to pass. And it's got to be done in a way that we make sure that it does help states and local governments. It does help the people at the bottom. And look, if I were Joe Manchin, maybe I'd be doing this too, as leverage to going, okay, well, maybe I'll vote for her. I need a little bit more. I need another bridge. I need some more road work. I need some education training. Go down the list of all the things that you could get for your state. I need the investment in new technology so that when we have this Green New Deal and this green revolution, that West Virginia is at the heart of it, so that we do take care of those coal miners. Maybe that's all part of this. And the thing is I had tweeted out, and I was a little frustrated at Manchin, and someone, tweeted back, that's why we got to get rid of him. And again, I'm going, whoa, no, hold on there. The Democrats need Joe Manchin, because I think, as Scott pointed out, accurately so, Manchin's the only guy who's going to win a statewide race in the state of West Virginia right now. You need him to keep the 50-50 split so that you control the Senate. So don't get carried away. We can hate on Manchin a little bit, But we also got to hate on him just enough so we can pull him back and say, hey, over here to the right side. And maybe you got to do what Republicans would do. And I've been saying this for a while. I'm hoping Chuck Schumer is as adept at this as Mitch McConnell has always been. But you gotta let them know which side the butter is on their bread. You gotta let them know that there's someone out there watching. Because we need this stuff to pass. If nothing gets done, if we get nothing accomplished over these next 60, 80, 100 days, if we get nothing done into the fall, 2022 is going to be a long year. And everyone knows that. This isn't crystal ball stuff. This is common sense stuff. This is look at history stuff. If people aren't better come summertime, if we're not moving back to some bit of normalcy, in the fall, if school isn't reopened and life isn't back to normal, there's going to be a price to pay. Because come next year, nothing gets done in that year because everyone's gearing up for the midterm election. And that will be a slaughter. But if you do the right things, if you get this rescue plan out, if you get an infrastructure bill pushed through, you get people back to work. The doomsday that everyone's pushing, that, Joe Biden's going to crash the economy and it's going to be the end of civilization and we're all going to be standing out in the cold. I can't tell you how many times I see that from people. How many people have sent me emails going, well, you're going to see what Biden's going to do. We're going to all be outside and broke and poor and dependent on the government. I'm going, where are you getting this stuff from? Biden's got to get this stuff out. We need this rescue plan. We need an infrastructure plan. All the other stuff we can debate, we can discuss, we can move on. Those two things have to happen. The infrastructure bill has to happen. And this is where there's a possibility of getting some Republicans. Do you get 10? I don't know. Are there 10? Are there 10 Republicans who will not see this as part of a game, but see it as part of an investment for the country? Because I see it twofold. Most importantly, I see it as competitively, we absolutely fundamentally need to upgrade our infrastructure. The fact that I think it was like 18th or 19th in broadband is disgraceful. The fact that we have internet speeds that are pathetically slow, disgraceful. The fact that we're paying pretty much more than the rest of the industrialized world for crummy service is disgraceful. We should be upgrading all of that stuff. We should be upgrading our airports. We should be upgrading our waterways. The fact that right now, the biggest crisis that's going to be happening out of Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana is the fact that there are millions of people without water and millions more on boil restrictions because guess what? The system's shut down. An antiquated system that has been needed to be upgraded for decades. And yet constant failure. Why? Because it's the politics. Oh, we don't want Joe Biden to do well. We don't want the Democrat to win. We don't want them to win the next election because if they get this will look good for them. It's criminal. Criminal, I tell you. So are there 10 Republicans who would side with an infrastructure bill? I hope so. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. If you're a union member, you probably know that one of your most important protections as a worker is your wine garden rights. But do you know the story behind why workers have those rights? It all started on this day in labor history. The year was 1975. That was the day the United States Supreme Court decided the case of National Labor Relations Board versus J. Weingarten Incorporated. The case involved Laura Collins, who was a dedicated 11-year employee at one of the Weingarten food stores. In June of 1972, store investigators spent days watching Laura's every move because of a report that she was taking money from the register. The investigator reported to management that no evidence existed. That's when the manager said he had heard that Laura had not paid for the lunches she ate while at work. The company had a confusing lunch policy, and many people at the store, including the manager, regularly ate lunches for free. Collins was part of the Retail Clerks Union Local Number 455, which later became part of the United Food and Commercial Workers. Yet, when she asked for a union steward during her discipline meeting, management refused. After the meeting, Collins told her union about what had occurred. They filed a case with the National Labor Relations Board. The board found in favor of the union. The case was appealed and wound its way through the court system until it was finally heard by the United States Supreme Court. In one of history's great ironies, a worker's Weingarten rights, which guarantees them union representation at discipline meetings, are actually named for the company that tried to take those rights away. Maybe we should start calling them the Collins rights, for the brave woman who stood her ground, asked for her union representative, and would not take no for an answer. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Grassroots progressives put Biden in the White House. But what do we get for that? Nothing guaranteed, but at least he gives us the possibility of winning some progressive policies. Unlike when Clinton and Obama fleetingly raised hopes in 1992 and 2008 that progress was possible, only to disappoint us, two new factors give progressive proposals a greater chance this time. First is Biden himself. A core part of his political makeup is that he's Joe Labor, coming to the job with a genuine affinity for working stiffs. For Biden, labor rights are not wonkish issues, but about showing gut-level respect for working families, actually caring about the well-being of workers. Second, and most important, is you and me. This is not 92 or 08, when our incoming president simply said thank you and goodbye to grassroots backers, then handed the government's economic keys to Wall Street bankers and corporate lobbyists. We won't allow Biden to do that, and he knows it. Today, there's an organized, battle-tested left on alert in practically every congressional district. Plus, we now have a growing cadre of unwilting agitators who are influential members of Congress, willing to expose and oppose insider sellouts. This time, progressive forces are not about to be shushed or shooed away by the Democratic Party's go-slow establishment. We're akin to the insistent forces of fundamental change who asserted themselves after Roosevelt won. FDR had not run as a New Dealer, but as a centrist Democrat promising little more than to rid the White House of the clueless Herbert Hoover. But the moment he was elected, grassroots movements were in his face. They created the historic New Deal reform agenda and then made Roosevelt spend political capital to pass it. This is Jim Hightower saying, like the New Dealers, we should push hard and fast for the big change America needs.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Joe Biden said today that America is back. We're back, baby! And so is the Transatlantic Alliance. That's back too. And the rest of the world applauded. The rest of the world took a sigh of relief. Oh my God, sanity is back. We love America again. That was kind of the reporting that I got out of the G7 today. It was kind of like a love fest. It was kind of like, oh, welcome back, big hugs, kiss, kiss kind of thing. The orange guy's gone, ding dong, the witch is dead kind of moment. I'm kind of happy that we're no longer a national embarrassment or a global embarrassment. But yeah, and Trump came out of his closet to say that we had China right where we wanted them, man. Had them right there, right by the short hairs, and we ruined it because of Hunter Biden, evidently. Here to share some thoughts on, well, the G7 Love Fest and just how badly Joe Biden hates America. I've asked our good friend Emily Bruyère to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of Horizon Advisory. HorizonAdvisory.com is their website. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thank you for having me.
So Joe Biden hates America. We had China right where we wanted it, and Hunter Biden screwed it all up. Am I getting that right?
Got a story right. Yeah.
And there was silence. I mean, that's kind of hard to buy, isn't it? I mean, you listen to the Trump people, that's what they actually believe.
And it's funny because, like, it should be so easy. Like, can't we just agree that, like, China's trying to take over the global system, right? Then we have an enemy. It's a very real enemy. We can cool it with the, like, maybe less grounded attacks. And then we can really, like, concentrate on that. And it's just, like, tough when you're handed such a good adversary, which is also such a legitimate one, not to engage there.
Yeah. Now, the comment that they were talking about, evidently Joe Biden said something about, domestic norms and immediately, he's siding with the communist Chinese and their treatment of the Uyghurs, and just this really weird kind of bizarre turn that I've had actually some conservative listeners say, see, look, Hunter Biden's got all these deals in China and look at all this stuff. And I'm trying to figure out how we write our vision and our perspective on what really is going on other than looking at what Hunter Biden and his laptops are doing.
Yeah, and, like, the problem is that, like, the real Hunter Biden story is, like, so much more pervasive, and also, like, so much more dangerous than whatever the one that's being told is, and that's that there's this entire system of elite capture and influence over the determinative entities in U.S. society, whether that's Wall Street or those close to political leaders or Hollywood, that's very deliberate on the part of the Chinese and that takes advantage of weaponization of capital. And if we could, like, pull ourselves up from the 5-second news cycle and the very specific flagrant cases, we would be able to see this as, like, a super systemic problem and therefore, like, really deeply problematic.
Right.
Because you can't just face the little symptoms of it. You have to go deep down and realize that, like, through and through, we risk having tied all of the influential players in our national ecosystem to China's interests.
Right. So to put that down to a truck driver's level, what you're basically saying is the Chinese are really bright, they're really smart, they're really well funded, and they're buying up all of the elites, all of the kids of the elites, all of the insiders. They're paying off one way or another so that they can have influence across the board. And party doesn't matter because the right is going to say Hunter Biden, and the left is obviously going to say Ivanka Trump. So that's right to your point, I think.
And we can also just, like, go for the non-personal examples, like American aerospace companies, American car companies, Wall Street, that depend on China for their short-term profits. It's exactly the same story. And it's in every different influential sector within the US ecosystem, whether that's, as you said, like the political elites or their kids, or that's the commercial sector or industry, or it's, the movies coming out of Hollywood.
No, and the reason I framed it the way I did is because, we're focused on the Hunter Biden or the Ivankas. We never get to the layer that you just pointed out, that it's corporate America. It's the Chamber of Commerce, who is the pipeline of American jobs from the U.S. to China. They're the conduit to moving out of this country. In fact, right now, as we speak in Bucyrus, Ohio, they're talking about moving a light bulb factory from Bucyrus over to China. And there's a big push to try and get them to stop. But you know what? It's not going to come down to what we say. It's going to come down to what our laws say. And this is where I think we need to have politicians and hopefully somebody like Joe Biden who's going to say, no, we need to manufacture light bulbs, at least some here in the U.S.
Right. And, like, that has to be what Build Back Better actually is, right? That, we're building back better, not only so that there's, like, necessary infrastructure in the U.S., but also that our infrastructure and our manufacturing are built on U.S. inputs and provide U.S. jobs rather just than giving China more inroads into our system.
No, I mean, it just seems like a little bit of common sense, but yet we're still hung up in this kind of, this information push pull that keeps us, right, like an inch deep instead of getting to where the real problems are, which are, China cheats. They cheat in everything. That they manipulate their currency, their mercantilist policies, target industries and take them over. I mean, that's where the real policy and the really arguments have to be levied at this point.
Yeah, but what China wants is precisely what we're doing, which is to pit us against each other, for us to lose sight of the actual contest, so that we spend all of our energy in like the useless infighting.
Yeah.
Well, they
and they fund it. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, their outreach for media and the fact that they fund so much of what goes on in our research. It's incredible how they've invaded our culture with our own money. And this is the thing that drives me nuts. We've got these massive trade deficits where we send out all of our money to them for whatever cheap trinkets they bring back to us. And then they bring that money back, because it all has to come back, by buying up our industries, by buying up our intellectual capacity, by buying up, you name it. We're basically selling ourselves out for trinkets.
Oh yeah, and we're doing it all to ourselves.
So how do we stop? And is Joe Biden going to be the guy that does that? Because look, I got real concerns from the beginning about Biden. I'm pretty happy about what I've seen thus far. Granted, we're less than a month in, but from this point forward, how do you think he's doing to this point?
I mean, I think I agree entirely. Like we talked about concerns we had months ago, and I think I have been pretty much nothing but like pleasantly surprised by the tone and tenor coming out of the administration on China. And his speech today at the G7 was yet another example of that pleasant surprise. And he clearly, and his administration are clearly head and shoulders above any past U.S. executive in terms of like recognizing China's threat, and also recognizing that the answer is rebuilding and ensuring the integrity of international rules, as we are, as he put it today, an inflection point in redefining the global order. The problem is that like to grade him, he has to like not only be head and shoulders above every other precedent. It's like way more of a challenge than that. And therefore, all my pleasant surprise aside, there is so much more yet to be done. So even like every great step he makes comes with so many other questions of, well, what's he actually going to do? Or what does this mean in practice? Or how possible is that actually?
No, I mean, look, we're only a month in, and I'm still guardedly optimistic. He's done some things that I'm really happy with. So far, I haven't seen any real missteps. Even though I get a ton of email of people saying, "Did you see his disgraceful speech today? Can't even get a line out." The guy has a stutter. He's always had that. He's always spoken. If that's what you're going to complain about, then I can't help you. I like the substance of what he had to say.
Yeah, and I mean his language today. He looked to our allies and partners, right? And he said, like, we need to work together, and we need to make sure that like the new global order that emerges is going to be one where everybody has to play by the rules, and those rules protect liberal democratic norms and values.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about Russia, because that came up. Obviously, Russia wasn't invited today, right, to the G7. The talk of taking on Russia and their involvement in our elections and in other elections, that has come up. Do we have a sense of what Biden is going to do on the front with Russia?
I'll give you what like my concern is, because obviously I have to turn to the negative on this. We, as the U.S. has for years now lumped China and Russia together as our great power adversaries, and these are like the big threats we have to deal with. And I think that's really dangerous, because yes, Russia is a massive threat. China is a systemic one. Russia is looking to spoil, China is looking to take over the global order. And that's very different, and that requires a very different kind of response. So anything that lumps them together seems to me like it risks undermining the appropriate measures taken to counteract China. And the indicators we've seen are a little mixed. I think this administration, for obvious reasons, continues to turn to the crutch of China and Russia, and China and Russia are the adversaries. That said, Biden has also acknowledged that they present different risks. It's just a question of at what point, like to what extent is that difference recognized, and to what extent is the response being adjusted accordingly?
No, you put it, I think, in the exact right context. Russia just wants to booger everything up and China wants to take over everything, I think is spot on accurate. Do you think that has to do with the fact that we still view Russia as the superpower that I grew up worrying about, mutual assured destruction, and, that we were the polar superpowers, and that people still view China maybe as an emerging power as opposed to what I would argue now is a superpower?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it takes no intellectual creativity on our end to say, wow, here's the great power threat Russia presents. And also, we don't have to reprove the case, right? Like, that's already been established. It's institutionalized in precedent. Whereas it's still kind of, even today, something of an uphill battle to argue that China is our adversary and that we are engaged in a competition, if not like a peacetime version of war with China, which is what we are. And because, as you said, there's that framing of they're still rising, but also because there isn't the pre-established, institutionalized, agreed upon framework that they're our not only competitor, but adversary, we're still engaged in all the intellectual gymnastics rather than fighting the fight.
Yeah, because I think China is much more dangerous to us long term than Russia is. I think Russia, as it's been explained to me by people a lot smarter than I am, you could basically starve Russia out by, just being Europe's gas station and cutting off their flow of revenue by basically just making their gas worthless. But China, they have over the last 4 years filled the void that Trump left by us not being players in the international market. And we're still not all on the same page internationally on how to deal with China. Everyone's still trying to cut their own deals, which puts them in a much, much different position now, especially since we have been out of the international game for a while.
Exactly. And that's the other part about the whole G7 conversation is you have Biden saying up there, like, we have to go out together and compete with China. But he's also speaking to European leaders who just, less than 2 months ago finalized an investment agreement with China that's premised on the assumption that China is going to create win-win benefits and make good on its commitments. So this is an international community that on the one hand needs to be taking action together, and on the other hand, where like significant players here are not on board.
Yeah, I mean, is there any, because I look for this, are there any agreements that China has lived up to? I mean, and I don't want to be always negative because look, I'll give them credit. They've done amazing things. They've stolen the most productive economy in the history of civilization right out from under us. I shouldn't say that. They haven't stolen it. We gave it to them. They didn't actually steal it. They didn't kick in the door. They actually opened the door for us, and we carried the stuff out, or they paid us to carry it out. Let me get that straight. But at least we know where the stuff is. They've got it. I guess you could look at that and go, wow, they were smart. They won.
Yeah, I think that's probably the commitment they've made good on. They said they were going to win, and they're definitely in the process of winning.
So how do we, as a matter of policy, and this is kind of the last line of questioning I've got, because, look, I love the fact that Biden's Build Back Better plan has a Buy American provision, that we're going to start looking at government procurement in a way that's going to benefit American manufacturing, even though Europe is kind of balking at that. They're a little upset. How do you see that all playing out going forward?
I mean, like the big question mark and the thing that needs to happen, and partly this is just because I'm still stuck in the frame of Biden's remarks today, but it's about like the rules of the emerging world, right? The world's changing, there's information technology that's creating a whole new set of systems. There's also like COVID, which has thrown the world into chaos, but also like prompted a new era. And, we, which is to say the US, but also allies and partners, including the G7, are like actively competing with China to redefine those rules and to make sure that those rules are ones where China is held accountable and has to like make good on its commitments and follow international law, etc. But like, how are we actually going to do that? And the like past mode of the US has been to assume that you can use the existing mechanisms to like, bring China to the negotiating table or slap them on the wrist. So we take things to, the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, or we file WTO cases. And that doesn't work because China has gamed all these systems and just has avoided all the repercussions that should come from them. So like the way this works, if it's going to work, is that the US and trusted allies and partners get together and they rework the systems. And either they find new institutions, or they change the rules of existing institutions, or they repurpose old ones for new means. And I mean, to my mind, like the first like really compelling step is that we, as the US, leading this movement, revoke China's permanent normal trade relations status. That's what allowed China to join the WTO. They shouldn't have that status. They're not a responsible actor. And that's the kind of mechanism that, if we like actually use it, gives us the power to change international systems.
Can we do that though? I mean, aren't we way too far down the road for that to happen?
I mean, we're like, if we're too far down the road to do that, I think we might be too far down the road to do anything.
Yeah, that's the scary part right there. And that is a problem. So what would that look like then? I mean, because if you remove permanent normal trade relations, what does that then look like?
So like there's an immediate shock, right? But then in theory, right, this is the kind of move that can inspire similar, if not quite the same degree of action on the part of other quote unquote responsible international players. And then having done that, that paves the groundwork to either credibly threaten China's place in the WTO, or really credibly threaten China's place in the WTO such that the international rules it was supposed to abide by when it ascended to that position, a position that has allowed it to reach the place it is in the world today, such that it has to follow those rules.
So how would that happen then? I mean, how would you go about that? Does that have to pass through the World Trade Organization's councils? Does that have something that Congress has to pass? Who's responsible for doing that?
Well, so the PNTR move, like permanent normal trade relations status, that's domestic, right? That's us. Anything after that is going to be, deliberation with allies to make sure that they take the right moves. And then in the WTO, I mean, that's untrodden territory. Like it has to work with its mechanisms or work with the critical mass of players who are going to take action. But
and is there anyone talking about doing this? I mean, because this is the first time I've heard this as a possibility. I've heard other ideas of devaluing our currency and basically trashing that as Reagan did back in the 80s, or threatening to do more of it that like he did back in the 80s. I've heard a whole bunch of ideas. This is the first time I've heard of, you know what? We just go back. We're turning back the clock. Screw you guys. We're taking this away.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone else is talking about this. Obviously, like there was talk about it, in the first decade after PNTR status was granted, when everyone was like, "This is an insane move. Why would we do it?" But now it's just been accepted as the norm, and why would we ever question?
Yeah, because I'm thinking, wow, we're way too far down the road for this. You want to hear American CEOs squeal? Do that. And now I got to tell you, I'm on board. How do we start the movement to do that? This is where we need to go. This is the move. This is the rallying cry. This is how we bring Trump supporters and liberals and bring people together. This is something I think most people would agree on.
Well, exactly. And like, also this was like the cause of the left, right? Like, there's no question we have like Sanders making speeches about how this should happen, right? Yep. But also something that now in theory would align with interests of the right. Yeah. So US was talking about it. It's us two now. We're the two who are talking about this one.
I'm in favor of let's figure out how to. I got to start now. My mind is working, and I got to figure out who I'm getting involved in this, because this sounds like a way we need to go, or at least the threat of it. I can't believe that no one else has threatened that in the past. I mean, especially Trump, who literally said that he had them right where he wanted them. I'm not sure where he wanted them, but he had them.
Yeah, and also just like, maybe I'm convinced this is the lever to pull. Maybe it's not this one, but regardless, it's this kind of thing, right? Like that's a systems-based question or a rule-based question, and then like in turn actually lets you shape or have the possibility to shape the kind of architectures that's what China takes advantage of.
So let me ask you this on the other front. Would this not be considered an act of war then?
Well, first, forgive this first answer, but China allowed a pandemic to spread across the world and kill many zeros worth of people and take down the global economy, and that wasn't considered an act of war. So I think deciding that, by those measures, deciding that the player who did that is not a responsible stakeholder for economic interaction probably wouldn't meet the threshold either.
Good point. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to argue. Last question I've got for you. So you had said something a minute ago that something that was on your mind about today's G Summit. Is there something in there that really got your attention today?
You know what? It's that Biden said twice that we're at an inflection point. And I mean, yes, it's obvious, but it's also probably the most important thing we could be saying right now, because the world is in the process of transformation, and China has recognized that, and China sees that as its opportunity to take advantage of and to leap ahead during the transformation. We need to realize it too, and therefore realize that the time to act is now.
So maybe some of my really far left friends are saying that maybe Biden does realize that this is that FDR kind of moment for transformational change, and maybe we're going to see big things. At least I hope.
Agreed.
We will see. But Emily, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. I got to think more of this Yank permanent normal trade relations. This sounds like a simple but good idea. Got to give it a thought. But Emily, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our good friend Emily de la Bruyère. She's the co-founder of the Horizon Advisory, horizonadvisory.com, their website. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at the fantastic work she does. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Green News Report special coverage.
This is a life-threatening humanitarian crisis, and it is growing by the hour. Families all over this state doing whatever they can to stay warm and sometimes making deadly choices.
Deep freeze devastates Texas power grid as death toll climbs.
Texas neglected and underinvested in its grid until it finally broke during the storm.
Privatization and deregulation left Texas vulnerable. Plus,
it seems pretty clear that a reckless reliance on windmills is the cause of this disaster. Is that right, do you think?
That is absolutely right.
Absolutely wrong. Right-wingers launched Texas disinfo campaign to attack renewable energy.
All of those misfires and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There's going to be a lot of people now out there trying to say, well, the fossil fuels have also failed.
That's right, because they did fail. Mark Morano, dead Rush Limbaugh's former producer. You got something against telling the truth? Dumb question, I know. That ain't what the fossil fuel industry pays you for. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. Boy, when this week started, it looked bad in Texas, and it has turned out to be even worse than I think any of us could have imagined.
Yes, the deadly days-long winter weather emergency in Texas and in other states has deepened into a full-blown disaster and humanitarian crisis with national security implications. As we go to air, millions remain without power across the southern and central U.S. The storm and its aftermath have killed at least 30 people, many in Texas. Hundreds have been treated at hospitals for exposure to the cold and for carbon monoxide poisoning as desperate people turn to unsafe measures to keep warm. The Texas power grid buckled because ultra-cold temperatures froze natural gas, coal, and nuclear power plants that are its primary energy sources. The state is suffering water outages because water mains and water treatment plants are literally frozen. Half of the state's 254 counties are experiencing water problems. Dozens of cities, including Houston, have issued boil water notices, but in hard-hit areas, there is no water to boil. Nuclear power reactors were shut down because there is no water to cool the reactors. The state's agriculture commissioner warned of looming food supply problems. Texas military bases have also been severely impacted, harming military readiness. In a press conference on Wednesday, Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott warned that most of the state will remain below freezing through the weekend. Abbott also ordered Texas natural gas producers to sell fuel to in-state power generators.
I have issued an order effective today requiring those producers that have been shipping to locations outside of Texas to instead sell that natural gas to Texas power generators.
Texas can't import power from other states like the rest of the country because in the 1990s, Republican lawmakers deregulated and privatized the state's electric grid to avoid federal regulations, cutting it off and isolating it from the rest of the country. That allowed Texas companies to prioritize profits over maintenance upgrades. So there are no requirements by the state to winterize energy resources.
No requirements, and because they're cut off from everyone else in the country, they can't get help when they need it.
The architect of the state's privatized, deregulated system told reporters that the state's energy market is functioning as it was designed. Even though Texas grid officials have confirmed that the blackouts are primarily due to freezing of gas, coal, and nuclear plants, and that frozen wind turbines were the least significant factor, Republican politicians, Fox News, and right-wing media have sprung into action to deflect responsibility for the cascading consequences of deregulation and privatization, launching a tsunami of misinformation to falsely blame wind energy for the state's grid failure.
That's so unlike them.
Here's Tucker Carlson.
So, unbeknownst to most people, the Green New Deal came to Texas. The power grid in the state became totally reliant on windmills. Then it got cold and the windmills broke.
No, you are not hallucinating. The Green New Deal did not pass. And no, Texas isn't primarily reliant on wind energy.
It didn't come secretly to Texas?
No.
So it's as if Tucker Carlson is just making stuff up?
Yes.
That's so unlike him.
Another storm has hit the south through the mid-Atlantic, with 1/3 of Americans under new winter storm advisories, creating more shortages of natural gas and more extended power outages. The Texas disaster could boost President Biden's proposal to harden the nation's aging electric grid and crumbling infrastructure, but will Republicans heed it?
And will America fall for the lies that are coming out of Texas, coming out of Fox News, trying to blame all of this on renewable energy? That propaganda machine is pretty powerful. For much more on this story and the ones we couldn't get to today because of it, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com, where we are celebrating the 12th anniversary of the Green News Report, and we thank you for stopping by bradblog.com/donate to help us. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I saw this story today, and I thought of my next guest because one of the things we all often joked about during the Trump years is back when Biden was vice president and Barack Obama was president. You used to have to search out things to talk about because it wasn't all about the president. Well, when I saw today that Kim Kardashian filed for divorce from Kanye West, I go, hey, this is right up my friend Bob Nay's, right up the right alley. So here to share some thoughts on I guess now Kim Kardashian's available. I wonder if Bob's got a shot. Our good friend Bob Ney, former congressman, political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, sure, Rick. I stepped out of the way and let Kanye West, take the lead. So, I guess I can share that story. How's that?
There you go. I just saw that. I'll be honest. I thought of you when I saw that. I'm going, this things are getting back to normal. This was literally a top 5 story on several places that do like a top news of the day. And I'm going, well, maybe we're moving back to normal, where nonsense that I could care less about is considered a top 5 story.
No, I know what you mean, because you and I and other radio guests, hosts that I do spots on their shows, we've talked about it over the last 4 years, and used to be you would find stories, and then you have other stories, and then when Trump became president, it was just Trump, 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 period. And now it's actually filtering to other things, including the Kardashians again.
Yeah.
So
the Kardashians.
Some billing.
I do have a Trump story though.
Okay.
That I have to get to because it is the most Trumpian thing ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Evidently, this executive chef who worked for BLT Prime, his name is Bill Williamson. He was the former chef for the former twice indicted president. And this is the most Trumpian thing ever. Evidently, Trump threw a hissy fit one time when he believed that the person he was dining with, that their steak was bigger than his.
Really?
And that from that point on, he only ordered 40-ounce tomahawk steaks for Donald Trump. So anytime Trump came in, he got a 40-ounce steak. So there was no question he got the biggest steak.
Oh, there you go. And I knew some stories. I didn't know the steak story. I knew, like LBJ, they had the chair higher than everybody, but even he was from Texas. He didn't even demand the largest steak, though.
Yeah, well, he just wanted to make sure his meat was bigger.
That's right. That's okay. I'll let you go there.
I wasn't going there. That was my wife's doing.
Now you're blaming Carol for everything.
She wrote it on the board. She wrote
Senator
it on
Rubio
the board.
would be thankful for that because, he got the small hands comment, remember, during the primary 4 years ago.
See, now you went there. All right. So,
okay.
So there you go.
Me and Carol, blame us.
There you go. I just had one of my favorite China guests on who was explaining to me something really simple that she thinks is possible. And I'm curious if you think it's possible. She said if we want to deal with China, one of the ways that we could go about it is pulling permanent normal trade relations back. Is it possible that we could undo the PNTR?
Well, I think that we, potentially could do it. I mean, there's a lot of, certain risks, but on that one, it's a great idea. This was the nail in the coffin. And as you know, I've said this a ton of times on your show. This was the unholy alliance of the Clinton-Gingrich deal.
Right.
And, of course, they started with most favored nation status, which my first visit sitting in front of Bill Clinton was with Nancy Pelosi on most favored nation status before it came to permanent trade. We sat there, arguing against it, Nancy Pelosi and I and some others. And then the permanent status came up, and we tried and put a coalition together of Democrats and Republicans. Bernie Sanders was one of the leads, Dennis Kucinich, from Ohio, and then they got the permanent status. That in itself was right there the minute that China got what it wanted, and Clinton and Gingrich believed they could change their behavior with that, okay? And they were wrong, but, I won't question their motives. And the guest is making an interesting point because Trump went tariff to tariff to tariff war. If you just stop the favored nation status, then we would go back to temporary deals of what they call MFN, most favored nation. That's a very interesting theory.
Yeah, I mean, because when she brought it up, my thought is, the Sanders people are on board with it. We got to take on China. The Trump people are on board with it.
Sure.
This could be how we unite the country.
Because yes, the one thing that Trump did was he silenced, for example, former Speaker Paul Ryan, huge free trade guy. David Dreyer, former congressman from California, huge free trade guy. They wouldn't stop talking about it. Rob Portman of Ohio, and Trump came in, and the Republicans literally, sort of, including McConnell, evaporated on the issue.
Yep,
they really did. So there's an edge there, and that would be very, very fascinating. And you're right, you would have Sanders and other Republicans included that don't like what's happened.
No, because when she said it, I'm going, wow, would that almost be like an act of war? Because you're literally, you're ramping things up, but I'm going, look, I'm a big proponent of tariffs. I'm a big proponent of borders for goods. Especially, if you're not competing on the right the right planes, if we're not on equal footing, you've got to somehow level that. I'm not totally against the idea of what Germany does with a value-added tax. At some point, you've got to protect your domestic producers. And doing that, if it means pulling permanent normal trade relations, that sounds like a good idea to me.
Right. I mean, it would be one swoop to do it. It would be fair trade. It's not protectionism, it's fair trade. And again, I'm hearing arguments that's making me sick to my stomach. Heard them last week. We need to be more productive. I'm sorry, American labor doesn't work for 12 cents an hour.
No, we can't outproduce slave labor.
No, you can't. You can't do it.
No matter how productive you are. And, well, I mean, what that is, that's a call for a total automation. Right. We're just going to automate everything, and then we can bring manufacturing back.
Mm-hmm. We'll probably have to buy the automation from the Chinese anyway.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, isn't that what they want? I mean, robotics is one of the things in their 2025 plan.
Well, I like that theory. That might be something that would be amazing to see that happen.
Yeah, because I'm just now thinking, who do I reach out to start that ball rolling? Because I got to imagine some smart person is thinking about it too. If some dumb truck driver got it.
Well, truck drivers make the country run.
This is true. That's how you get your groceries. You're absolutely right. I wanted to get your thoughts on today's G7 summit. America's back. The Transatlantic Alliance is back. And the rest of the world kind of said, yay.
Right. I think that the rest of the world's happy. I think our allies in general, obviously, are happy. And in Europe, if you look at President Biden, if you look at his game plan, it's been fascinating to watch the inside baseball of who Biden called, who Biden didn't call, and what order he did it in. And his first call was to our allies, in NATO and our allies in the G7. He followed back up by participating in the Munich Security Conference by Zoom, of course. They had to do it, which has been there since the 60s, with 300 or 400 of security experts around the world at different levels of government and private sector, and then of course the G7. And I think that he was, obviously they waiting for him to see what he's going to say. But on top of it, he's made the strategic phone calls, and they followed up with Blinken with phone calls. And also he did an amazing thing. He didn't do this at the G7 summit, but he said that he will go, when it comes to Saudi Arabia, he and the king of Saudi Arabia, who is not MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, as everybody thinks, but King Salman, who happens to have dementia. But he said he will deal with him, forcing the hand of Mohammed bin Salman, who's really running the kingdom. And I thought that was a brilliant move, not calling Mohammed bin Salman to show him where we're going to stand with, the type of way he conducts himself.
Yeah.
So you combine that, the G7, a lot of the countries are very, very happy, obviously, with us and how we're operating. And we went back into participating in the COVAX. That's a big one, the vaccine program worldwide, which in September of 2020 we stopped with the Trump administration. So you can see Biden bringing us back into the flow of communication with the rest of the key allies.
Yeah, and he's also committed some money for I guess developing and poorer countries to get the vaccine, because we just can't try and eradicate it here and let it flare up elsewhere, because eventually it mutates and comes back.
Right. At West or Africa, parts of it are predicted, if we don't do something, to be vaccinated in 2023. That's unacceptable. That will be a problem for all of us, not just them, but also the rest of the world. So, yes, we're back in there to the point of $4 billion. He's not going to stand in the way of it. And again, we were the one odd person out in that entire multiple worldwide coalition.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's an important sign, because I've been saying for the longest time that the void that Trump left has been filled by the Chinese. And the longer we leave that open, the more power we give them.
Well, yes, and it also follows with Biden's China theory, where he wants to utilize allies to help us in the pressure against China. So by not ostracizing them, we get more help.
Yeah, I mean, that honey thing, that honey vinegar thing.
Right, there you go.
Your mother used to tell you when you were a kid.
Yes, you say
That thing. I wanted to get your thoughts today on YouTube. The big story coming out of your state of Ohio. Evidently, YouTube has taken down a video of this guy this Thomas Rands, I guess his name is. He's an attorney for Ohio Stands Up. Evidently, he testified for 30 minutes before the Ohio State Legislature. He testified to a whole bunch of debunked theory and a whole bunch of stuff. They have now taken that down for YouTube, but it evidently stands in the Ohio State Legislature.
No, I'm not familiar. So how does it still stand there?
Well, I mean, they didn't. Evidently, the testimony is still in the record there, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we can't have it on YouTube, but it remains on the record. And the question that I have is, I'm looking at this stuff, and I remember the hearing where they brought people and they had this stream of people testifying. Is there something where, testifying to things that are false or that have already been debunked at some point? Is that not, is there nothing that can be done about that? Because look, if YouTube's taking it down, maybe we should be looking at people who are testifying under oath and what they're testifying to.
Well, I mean, true. And again, I apologize. I don't know the particulars, of this particular guy that testified. But obviously, the legislature has what's called LSC, Legislative Service Commission in Ohio. And like anything, if there's something that's false, you normally debunk it and you put that into the record within the legislature. So I'm not sure why they didn't do that or why there's not a move to do that, but that's the normal procedure. I served in the legislature.
That's why I asked you, because I know you have intimate knowledge.
Right.
But like one of the things that they claim, he said during the testimony is no one under 19 has died of COVID-19, and that is patently false. They know that.
Right.
But that's, among other things, among other of the, the slew of vaccination claims, the slew of ridiculous COVID claims that we see coming out. I mean, the guy testified for 30 minutes. I wanted to actually go back and watch it just to be able to see it, but clearly they have taken it down.
Well, I mean, we've had people, before when I was in the legislature that would, make obviously some, really misleading statements and bizarre statements. And that would, and he's obviously been an anti-vaccine type of person, but you would think that the legislature would, make it clear, look, this man made this statement, is before a committee of the House, and we're going to make sure that, this is debunked and we're going to enter that into the record. Because obviously our state data will debunk that. I mean, we know that 113 it may not be a huge number, but 113 kids have died. I mean, we know that. So you would think that somebody would put that into the record, and I'm not sure why they wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I don't either. But
especially with DeWine as governor there.
Yeah, I was curious if you had a thought on it, so I'm glad I got that from you. And finally, report out, evidently the CDC is claiming that in the first 6 months of the pandemic, all of us are going to die a year sooner.
Yes, I caught this story today, and it was really fascinating because when you think of the impact and how great it really, really was, it's the first time since World War II that we have lost that much time in our longevity track. We literally lost a year, and the key to that is we lost a year of our longevity going backwards in 6 months' time. The first 6 months of the pandemic. And again, that's the first time since World War II that our life expectancy has fell that dramatically, which is 0.24% in a period of a time. So it was a big deal.
And minorities fell back even further.
Right. Oh yes. Yeah, that's obviously another point here, and that's why they're stressing that people within the minority community have to also. I know there's suspicious people are of the vaccine and the people administrating it, but they've got to really be careful because they're more at risk for a whole multitude of reasons.
Yeah, still on track to get your second one?
Yes, in fact, we talked about Wichita, Kansas,
yep.
I believe, and I actually stopped physically tonight to reaffirm my father's on the 26th, and I laughed. I said, I don't mind driving to Wichita, but I just want to make sure, can I go to St. Clairsville, Ohio? And they said yes. So I am on track. I put it up on Facebook with a picture of myself because, I've still got a lot of people that follow me and things. And then I had people that said, well, I don't know why you're doing this. Why did you do this? You don't need to do it. Well, I guess good for you. And I thought, okay, please, people need to get the shot.
As my teenage daughter says, you do you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, right, exactly.
I'm getting the shot. I tell people, everybody that comes around, I'm getting the shot. It just is what it is.
Absolutely.
We'll go from there. But, Bob, I appreciate the time.
Well,
Thanks
you, Rick.
again, as always.
Okay, thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1997. And if you had theater tickets that evening to see Beauty and the Beast in Seattle, the show did not go on as planned. Musicians at the Fifth Avenue Theater, members of Local 76-493, had been on strike for a week. At issue was their compensation for performance. The union believed their wages were far below the industry standard for similar markets. The theater managers refused to budge. The union went out on strike, canceling 8 performances of the much-anticipated Disney Broadway musical. But this was the last night the theater stayed dark. Management brought in replacement musicians. The curtains rose with the scab musicians playing inside while the picketers marched outside. The Musicians Union had a long history in Seattle. Local 76 was first formed in 1898. 60 years later, they joined the Black Musicians Local 493, integrating the union for the very first time. 18 members of the Local 76 participated in the Fifth Avenue Theater strike. 4 additional Disney musicians refused to play. Community solidarity for the strikers was strong. Each night, hundreds would join the picket lines as a brass band played outside the theater. Violinist Libby Poole Presley was impressed by this show of support, saying, "I was floored. Here were hundreds of people helping us out in a stunning show of labor and community solidarity. To us striking musicians, it felt like magic to have the power of that many people behind us." The magic of solidarity helped the musicians win a contract victory and end their strike. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, interesting story. A coalition of 17 attorneys generals from across the country. They have signed on to calling for a student debt cancellation plan of up to $50,000. It's being led by Latita James and Maria Healy of Massachusetts, James of New York. And look, I'm not against the idea of debt forgiveness. I think it's probably not a bad idea. But to just go, we're going to forgive $50,000 of debt today and do nothing to systematically change our education system is a bad idea. And unless you're going to address what's going on in education and return it to the days of, maybe 50 years ago, where we were taxing very wealthy people. We were funding education at a rate that people could afford to go through on a minimum wage job and pay their own way without taking on a generation of debt. I just think that you're picking winners and losers, which is one of the things the right loves to scream about. I'm not saying that before people lose their ever-loving freaking minds. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but it's got to be part of a much bigger package, because all you're then doing is creating a scenario where either people are going to expect it down the road and make those choices down the road, figuring that a bailout is and a reduction is coming, and then maybe they get stuck, or we're going to continue to reward bad behavior. I think something has to be done. There's a bunch of ideas out there. One of the ones that I liked is 0% interest loans. We can borrow a ton of money at literally 0% interest. So we can literally refinance everyone's loan and make it a 0% interest. And that would be the fairness thing that the people who whine and complain and say, I paid my student loans off. And I did. I paid mine off. But here again, I'm not against helping people who are struggling. But I think if you were to make them 0% interest, that would solve a lot of problems. I think there are ideas that have been out there of public service or anything. There are things we could be doing. Now, Joe Biden has said, I guess he's not interested in going above 10,000. I don't really know what 10,000 is going to do. And I go, look, for people who need it, it's $10,000. It is what it is. But, we need significant policy on this. And it's got to be not just here's a one-time reduction, but we've got to figure out how to redo the system. College costs are just way out of control. And it comes down to a bunch of things. As one administrator admitted to me, the reason that tuitions have gone up so high, especially in the private institutions, the well-known ones, is they do a bunch of courting of foreign students. And it didn't dawn on me, because I remember back when I was in college, we had a bunch of foreign students that came in, and they paid full tuition. There was no grant money. There was no student aids. There was none of that. They were full tuition. And the reason they jacked those prices up is because they were collecting that full tuition from overseas. Part of it's that. Part of it is they've spent so much money building, these Taj Mahal kind of dorms and the latest, greatest this and that. As where the dorm I stayed in was, literally a box. There was nothing there. So, I mean, to be honest, we should, and we must do something. I'm just not sure, that being the answer going, we're going to just wipe away $50,000. It's got to be something more. And I know that's because you don't have student loan debt. You're right, but I did. And I remember how difficult it was to pay off. I probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000. So, that's not the 50,000. That's not the 200 that I've heard some people tell me about. That's not people being, just mugged with interest rates and late payment fees. And, when they lose a job and they have to freeze their payments for a while, that they end up having everything eaten up by the interest. It's criminal what we've let these companies get away with. Which is why I think a great idea is immediately 0% interest. Refinance the whole lot of them. Have a federal program, refinances everything. Seems like a good, reasonable idea to me. And finally, South Carolina, we're teeing up the Supreme Court case that is going to give the Trump Supreme Court the ability to overturn Roe versus Wade. The South Carolina governor yesterday signed a bill into law, basically banning all abortions in the state of South Carolina. The law, I guess, will go. I think would prohibit abortions as early as 6 weeks. So I guess we've gone from 20 down to 6. Most people don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. So this is one of the most restrictive in the country. Basically, being done with it. Going to see what happens when it gets to the Supreme Court, because the pro-choice folks have said, look, we're going to file in a lawsuit immediately, and that is happening. They're they've already sought injunctive relief. we'll see. Well, this is the consequence of elections, and this is what we were talking about back in 2015 and 2016. That when Trump had the chance to put in these kind of extreme justices, that we were going to get to this moment. Well, this is what's happening. Now, this could be one of those things where they overturn Roe and it reverts back to the states, which then that becomes where the organizing really has to start, and women's rights have to be protected. It's just, it's the time we live in, and I'm so fearful for my daughters and their generation. They're going to have to grow up in the environment potentially that my mother's generation and before had to grow up in. And it's scary stuff. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.